We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 42a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara brought a Mishnah in Meseches Menachos, in which Rabbi Meir says by a carbon mincha, when they would burn both the kometz and the levona, that's the fistful of flour, and also the levona, which was the frankincense, both of those were the matirin, both of those were the permitters of the carbon. They were essentially the equivalent of the zrikas hadam, the application of the blood, by animal karbonos. And so Rabbi Meir said, let's say the person had a machsheves pigel by the kometz, but not by the levona, or by the levona and not by the kometz, it is still going to be pigel, and there will be a liability to kares. Now, the simple explanation of Rabbi Meir is mefaglin b'chatzi matir, even though that's a half a matir, but a half a matir, if you have a machsheves pigel, it does become pigel. That would have been the simple explanation in Rabbi Meir. However, Reish Lakish says that is not the explanation in Rabbi Meir. Rather, the explanation is, if the first one that is brought, let's say the first one that is burnt is the kometz, and there's a machsheves pigel, and then by the levona, it's b'shtika, it's in silence, there's no machshava at all, so then we just assume whatever the machshava was at the beginning, al das rishona, that machshava, that intention is continuing by the second matir, and so really, essentially, Rabbi Meir is saying, you do need to have by the full matir, the machsheves pigel, but we say that we assume that it's al das rishona. That was Reish Lakish's explanation of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara now is in the middle of asking a question on this explanation of Rabbi Meir from a brisa. The Gemara is in the middle of bringing the brisa. The brisa is contrasting the karbonos that are on the outer mizbeach and the ones on the inner mizbeach. Again, as we have said, when it comes to the outer mizbeach, so then even one application is sufficient. That's why if you have a machsheves pigel, even by one application of the blood, it becomes pigel. But the brisa continues and says, Avol domim hanitanen al hamizbeach hapnimi. When it comes to karbonos where the blood is applied on the inner mizbeach, Kagon, for example, our boim v'shalosh shel Yom HaKippurim, we have the 43 applications that happen on Yom Kippur. V'achad asar shel par Kohen Mashiach, and the 11 by the power of the Kohen Gadol. V'achad asar shel par helam davar shel tzibur, and the 11 by the power helam davar shel tzibur when the community sins. So over there, pigel bein barishona uvein b'shniya uvein b'shlishis. Let's say the person has an intention of pigel, whether by the first application, the second application, the third application. Rabbi Meir Omer pigel v'chayavin olav kares. Rabbi Meir says it's pigel and there's a liability to kares. V'chachamim Omer, and the chachamim say ein bo kares ad sheyafagel b'chol hamatir. There's no kares unless the intention of pigel takes place throughout the entire matir. And Rashi explains, Avol b'domim hapnimim, but by the inner bloods, the ones where the blood is applied inside the Beis HaMikdash, kagon arboim v'shalosh shel Yom HaKippurim, like the 43 of Yom Kippur. Rashi says, Achas lamala v'sheva lamata al bein habadim. There was one that was above and then 7 below. Again, it's talking about the applications of the blood, the sprinklings of the blood. Bein habadim is referring to in the Kodesh Kadoshim by the Aron. Midam hapar, that was from the blood of the bull. Uchenegdon midam hasar, and similarly from the blood of the he-goat. Harei Tezayin, that comes out to a total of 16. Uchenegdon ala paroches, and then also corresponding to that on the paroches, Harei Lamed Beis, now we're at a total of 32. V'arbal karnos mizbeach hapnimi, then you have 4 on the 4 corners of the inner mizbeach, mishneim from both of them, mishneim keachad from both of them together, mu'urav, and that's mixed together. Kedechsiv, as it's written, v'lokach midam hapar midam hasor, he takes from both the blood of the bull and the blood of the he-goat. Sheyihu mu'uravin means to say that they're mixed. Harei Lamed Vav, so now we're at a total of 36. V'sheva hazos al taharo harei mem gimel, and then you have the 7 sprinklings that take place al taharo shel mizbeach is the phrase, and that comes out to a total of 43. And then it said, pigel bein barishona. It said, let's say there's pigel whether in the first, second, or third. What's that referring to? So the first over here is b'matanos shalifnai v'lifnim. That refers to the applications that take place in the Kodesh Kadoshim. And then bein b'shni, and the second one is ala paroches. That's the applications on the curtain that's separated between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kadoshim. And bein b'shlishis, or the third, means al mizbeach hazav. That's the applications of the mizbeach hazav. And again, we have here a machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Meir says it's pigel and there's a liability to kares. And the chachamim say it has to be a pigel b'chol hamatir, otherwise there is no kares. And the Gemara continues and brings its proof from this brisa. Katani miha, nevertheless, what does it say in this brisa? Pigel bein barishona, bein b'shniya, bein b'shlishis. It says, doesn't matter if it was the first, second, or third. Upaligan, we see a machlokas tanoim, and so you see it doesn't matter the order. According to Reish Lakish, Rabbi Meir only says that it's pigel if the first one had a machsheves pigel, and then we say subsequent, any subsequent applications are al das al das rishona. We assume that everything is under the same intention. But here it doesn't seem to matter. Here it doesn't matter what order, when there was a machshavas pigul. Apparently, Rabbi Meir is saying that there is pigul b'chatzi matir. Rashi explains, Katani Mias Bain Bishniya could be the second one. Demashma Lo Barishon, it sounds like it doesn't need to be the first one. Upaligan, yet there's a machlokes. V'kam Rabbi Meir pigul, and Rabbi Meir says it's pigul. Ve'in kan misham das rishona. You can't say it's because of das rishona that everything is with the first intention. Ela dekosavra mefaglin b'chatzi matir. Rather, it seems that he holds that there is pigul b'chatzi matir utiyuvta de Reish Lakish, and this would be a refutation of Reish Lakish. And the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avin. Rav Yitzchak bar Avin says, "Hacha b'may askin." And here, what are we dealing with? Kagon shepigel b'shchita. Actually, the case over here is we're not talking about the applications of the blood. We're talking about an intention of pigel during the shchita, during the slaughtering of the animal. Techad matir. That's just one matir. The shchita is just considered like one matir in terms of the halachas of pigel, and that's why Rabbi Meir says that it's pigel. But the Gemara says, if so, my time of the Rabbanan, if that's what's going on over here in this Brisa, so what's the reason of the Rabbanan? Of course, by the Shechita, where the Shechita is its own avoda, it's not considered to be a number of matir, and of course over there, we're going to say that it's pigel. Rashi explains, Kagon shapigel b'shchita, there was a pigel intention by the slaughtering, Hadukam Rabbi Meir, pigel b'shniya. When Rabbi Meir said that there's pigel in the second, what does he mean? That it's pigel, that it's considered pigel. Kagon shenishbach adam, it means as follows. Let's say the blood spilled, after he finished the applications of blood inside, the kaimelon beseder yuma, and we've established in Meseches yuma yavi acher v'yaschel behechel, that he has to bring another one and start in the hechel. Ukeshashachar es hashenim, when he slaughtered the second one, pigel b'shchita. So the case over here is he had a machshavas pigel, an intention of pigel by slaughtering it. V'kam Rabbi Meir dahu par havi pigel, and Rabbi Meir saying that bull is pigel. Sharei pigel bo ba'avoda shlema, because that's a full avoda the shchita, and he had an intention of pigel, and that's what Rabbi Meir was saying in this brisa. And again, the Gemara continues and asks, if so, my time of the Rabbanan, what's the reason of the Rabbanan? Of course it should be pigel in this case. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Man chachamim, who are these chachamim? Rabbi Eliezer. The chachamim is Rabbi Eliezer. And the Shinuya Nuschos notes, Tzarech Lomar Elazar, instead of having Rabbi Eliezer over here, it should be Elazar, v'chein b'chol ha'amud b'Gemara. And the Shinuya Nuschos says that's the way it is in the entire Amud. Instead of Rabbi Eliezer, it should always be Rabbi Elazar. And the Gemara continues, D'Tnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah later on, HaKometz, when it comes to the Kometz, the fistful, V'halavon, and the frankincense, V'haketoris, and the incense, U'minchas Kohanim, the carbon mincha of the Kohanim, U'minchas Kohen Mashiach, and the carbon mincha of the Kohen Gadol, U'minchas Nesachim, and the carbon mincha which comes with the libations, the Nesachim, Shehikrev Me'achas Mehen Kezayis B'chutz, if a person offers from one of them one Kezayis outside of the Beis HaMikdash, so Chayev, he's liable. Rabbi Eliezer, again, the Gersa might be Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar poter, and Rabbi Elazar says exempt ad sheyakrev es kulan, until all of them are offered. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Elazar, he the chachamim in the brisa are Rabbi Elazar, the afilu b'halo aschutz, even when it comes to actually offering the sacrifice outside of the Beis HaMikdash, poter b'shnei matir, and Rabbi Elazar says poter, he says exempt when there are two matir, and some have the girsa here of chatzi matir, when it's half a matir. Al molav avoda he klal, the point is, according to Rabbi Elazar, we see it's not considered an avoda, ad sheyigmor kol ha'avoda, until you finish that entire avoda. V'avagav the haktaras kezayis have haktar, even though the burning of the kezayis is considered a proper haktara. Kedektani hasam, it says, as it says over there, v'kulan sheikrivu bifnim v'shayir mehen kezayis. It says if you offer them all inside the mikdash, but then there's a kezayis that remains, v'ikrivu b'chutz, and then you offer that kezayis outside the mikdash, chayiv, there's a liability. Afilu Rabbi Elazar, even according to Rabbi Elazar, miu, nevertheless, heichad lo gomer avoda, in a situation where it's not, the person is not completing the avoda, heichad lav gemar avoda lo chashav la l'chiyuv ela b'chutz. If it's not the gemar avoda, it is not considered important enough that there would be a liability, again, if it's offered outside of the mikdash. And the point over here is, hachanami here also, avagav d'shchita avoda shleimo, even though the slaughtering of the animal is a full avoda, kevon she'enu avoda nigmara, Besir zeh levado, since the avodah is not completed with this he-goat alone, some have the girsa of bepar zeh levado, with this par alone. Again, the case over here was that they had to bring another animal, she'eno ba ela lahashlam, because it's just coming to complete the avoda. V'avoda achas hi shenasis b'shtayim v'shalosh shchitos. Essentially, there's one avoda happening over here that's happening with 2 or 3 shchitos, 2 or 3 slaughterings. So ein hashchita chashuvas lefagel. So therefore, that shchita is not chashuv enough. It should be the girsa should be chashuva. That shchita, that slaughtering, is not considered chashuv enough to create pigul again, because here you were bringing a subsequent animal in order to complete the avoda. That was the case over here, and that's why it's not going to be pigul according to the Chachamim. Again, they're following this sheet of Rebbe Lazar. And the idea over here is that all of these items that are listed in this Mishnah later on, again, the kometz, levona, the ketores, etc., all of these items are entirely supposed to be burned on the Mizbeach. And so therefore the question is, let's say you would offer them up outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Of course, if you would offer them up in their entirety outside of the Beis HaMikdash, of course, that would be an issue of halo aschutz, of offering outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and the person would be liable in such a situation. The question is, what if the person just offers up outside of the Beis HaMikdash a kezayis? Would that be a liability or not? That's the machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer in this Mishnah later on. And even Rabbi Eliezer, he would agree that if the person offers up a kezayis and that is all that is remaining to be offered up, meaning everything has been offered inside the Beis HaMikdash and there is just a kezayis left, that's what Rashi meant when he said v'shayer mehen kezayis. If all that remained was a kezayis, and if it was offered b'chutz, then even Rebbe Lazar would hold that there is liability in that situation. But if it's not the Gemara Avoda, again, hecha de lo Gemara Avoda, if it's not a situation of the Gemara Avoda, Rebbe Lazar holds, so then the kezayis is not enough to be chayiv, is not enough to be liable for offering it up outside of the Beis HaMikdash. And then we apply that to our case as well. In our case as well, we're talking about a situation where the person needed an additional animal. As Rashi said above, Kegon shenishbach adam, that the blood spilled out, they weren't able to complete all the applications of the blood, so they slaughter a second animal to complete the applications of the blood. And there also, Rebbe Lazar would say the same thing. Since there's a number of shchitas to complete the avoda, there actually has to be a pigul intention in all of the shchitas, and just having a pigul intention in one of those shchitas is not going to be sufficient. And again, the Chachamim in the Brisa are following Rebbe Lazar. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'amar Rava, but didn't Rava say, Umoder Rebbe Lazar b'damim, that Rebbe Lazar admits when it comes to the applications of the blood, meaning that Mishnah from later on, talking about the kometz, the levona, the ketores, all of those things that are offered. So there Rebbe Lazar says pater until you offer the thing in its entirety. But by the applications of blood, Rebbe Lazar doesn't say that. The Tanan, as we learned in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Meseches Yuma, Rebbe Lazar, Rebbe Shimon Omrim. Rebbe Lazar and Rebbe Shimon, they say, Mi mokom shepasak, from the place that he stopped, Misham hu ma'az, from there he begins. And Rashi explains, V'amar Rava, but Rava said, L'kamon be'perak hashochet, this is later on in perak hashochet, the Katani, it says over there, Hazorek mixas damim b'chutz chayiv. It says that if the person throws some of the blood outside of the mikdash, so then there's liability for offering outside of the Beis HaMikdash. V'lo polig Rebbe Lazar, and Rebbe Lazar over there does not argue. V'yamar Rava Allah b'Gemara, and Rava says over there in the Gemara that Mod Rebbe Lazar b'damim, that Rebbe Lazar admits when it comes to the applications of blood, Shemnasan b'matana achas mechatos hapnimios chutz la'azara. Let's say we're talking about the inner carbon chatases, there's a lot of applications of blood. Let's say he just does one of the applications outside of the azara, so then chayiv, then he's liable for offering it outside of the Beis HaMikdash. V'yafal pisha kulan avoda achas hein la'akev. Now, even though all of the applications of blood are considered one avoda in terms of them all being required, v'ikol l'meimar de'ein kan elachatzu avoda. So one could say that it's just half of the avoda. Dumya de kometz or levona, similar to the case we had above of the kometz and the levona, again where Rebbe Lazar there said potter, but chayiv, but over here it's chayiv holu chenegda lefnai v'lefnim miskabelasi. The reason is because the corresponding amount in the Kodesh Kadashim would be received shemnasan matana achas bifnim, meaning to say if the person would apply one application of the blood bifnim v'nishbach adam, and then the blood would be spilled, maybe dam acher. The halach is that you actually bring blood from another animal, and you just begin from wherever you left off, according to Rebbe Lazar. Tetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah in Yuma, Rebbe Lazar of Rebbe Shimon pligi at Tanna Kama. Rebbe Lazar and Rebbe Shimon over here are arguing on the Tanna Kama. The Yomar nosan mixas matanas shebifnim. The case over here is as follows: some of the applications of blood were done inside. Again, we're talking about inside the Kodesh Kadashim. V'nishvach adam, and then let's say at that point the blood spilled out. So what do? So yavi dam acher. So you bring other blood. V'yaschil betchil. You have to start over. over, hoel v'lo gamar osa kapara, because that kapara, that atonement of lifnai v'lifnim wasn't finished. So that, you can't just start in the middle of that, according to the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omrim, but Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they say, no, you just pick up from wherever you left off. Alma avodahi. So you see that even that one application is considered an avoda. That's where they understand this halach over here as well. And so now the point is, v'i pigul l'chiyav chutz kamedamis. Now, if we're comparing pigul to the obligation, let's say somebody again offers up a carbon outside of the mikdash, that's the comparison we're making over here. So now, if by the applications of blood, Rabbi Elazar says that we don't say that you're exempt if you just offer up bachutz part of it. There we actually say even doing one application of blood outside of the mikdash, there's a liability. And so therefore by pigul as well, we should say, and again, we're talking here about shchita, about slaughtering, and so Rashi says, Lomi boy b'shchita, we don't even need to say by shchita to have a pigul that it would be considered to be pigul, because again, by shchita, at least each shchita is its own avoda. Ela afilu pigul b'matona achas, but even let's say there would just be pigul in one of the applications of blood, Rabbi Elazar pigul here. According to Rabbi Elazar, it would be pigul, and so therefore it comes out, you can't really answer that the Tanna Kama over here in our brisa is following, that the Chachamim in our brisa are following Rabbi Elazar. Even if we say we're talking about shchita and we say we're following Rabbi Elazar, it's not going to help, because Rabbi Elazar was not talking about the applications of blood, and therefore you can't apply to Rabbi Elazar, you can't apply Rabbi Elazar's logic to shchita either. And so the Gemara continues and goes back to the original interpretation of the Brisa, that the Brisa actually is talking about the applications of blood. That's where the person had the intention of pigul. It's not during the slaughtering of the animal. And Elo Amar Rava, rather Rava says, what's the case in the Brisa? Kagon shapigul barishona. The case is that he has an intention of pigul barishona at the first application of blood. Vishasak b'shni. And then he does the second application in silence. He has no intention whatsoever. V'chazar upigul b'shlishis. And then in the third application of blood, he again has the intention of pigul. And Rashi explains, Elam Rava, rather Rava says, Liolam b'shapigul b'hazos. Really, we are talking about where the intention of pigul is by the applications of the blood. Udekashalach, and what was the question again? The whole question from this brisa was against Reish Lakish. Again, Reish Lakish said that according to Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir says that a person is chayiv, let's say he just has an intention of pigul by some of the hazos, Rabbi Meir doesn't mean that there's pigul b'chatzi mati. Rabbi Meir actually means that al das rishon hu, so that he's really just doing whatever his first intention was. So if he first had the intention of pigul, then we assume that the subsequent applications of blood are also being done with that intention of pigul. That's what Reish Lakish said. And the problem was that the brisa, it was talking about pigul barishona, pigul b'shnia, pigul b'shlishas. It wasn't only talking about having an intention of pigul at the first application of blood. And so that's what Rashi now says with the kasha lach, and that which was difficult for you, katani pigul b'shnia, o b'shlishas. It says he has an intention of pigul in the second application, the third application, and so therefore it doesn't seem to be indicating al das rishona. V'kasalka daitach dev rishona shasak. Now we initially thought that means that in the first application of blood it was done in silence, so to speak. It was not done with an intention of pigul. V'kamer Rabbi Meir pigul, and Rabbi Meir saying it's pigul, and that was a question against Reish Lakish. So dahachav and askin, and the answer is here. What are we actually talking about? Kagon shapigul barishona v'shasak b'shnia. The case over here is he had an intention of pigul barishona with the first application, silence in the second, the middle application, v'chazar pigul b'shlishas, and then in the third application he again has an intention of pigul. Uliolam time of Rabbi Meir mishum dekasav ashtika hashnia, and really that is the answer of the explanation of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that the silence at the second application, al das machshava rishona nasis kereish lakish, it's being done with the understanding, the same intention of the first application of blood, just like Reish Lakish explained. And the Gemara continues and elaborates, Ma'u detema, what might you have said? Izal gadaitach al das rishono, al das rishono, that maybe you would say like this, if really it's all al das rishono, it's just a continuation of the original intention. So mahader pigule b'shlishas lamali, why did he have to have an intention? And again, these intentions are being spoken out loud. Why did he have to do that at the third application? It almost sounds like the second one was not al das rishono. That's what you might have thought. So kamash malon, that's what the Bryce is teaching. Even in this scenario, we understand al das rishono. And Rashi explains, Hachi Garsinan Ma'u Detema Amrinon, Kilomar, what the Gemara means to say is, V'hai denok ad chazro pigul b'shlishis. The reason why we have a situation where he again has a pigul intention by the third application, Ribuza Ashminan, it's teaching us a chiddush. Ti'af agav de chazro pigul b'shlishis Amrinon, even though he went ahead and he had that intention in the third application, we say, T'shtika shniya nami al das machshava kamaisa yahava, that the silence in the second one was also al das machshava rishona. But the Gemara continues and asks, Maskif lo Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi asks on this, Midi Shasak Katani, does it say anything in this Bryce about silence? Elam Rav Ashi, rather Rav Ashi says the explanation of the Bryce is as follows. Again, according to Reish Lakish, Hacha b'may askin, and here what are we dealing with? Kigon shepigel barishono uveshnia uveshlishis. He has an intention of pigel both in the first, second, and third applications. And mahu detema, what might you have said? Isal kadaitach kala osa al das rishona hu osa. If it should enter your mind that whatever the person's doing is he's just doing it according to his original intention, so mahader pigule bechol chada v'chada lamali. What's the point of having that intention, that machshavas pigul in each application? Kamash malon, and so that's what the Bryce is teaching us, that again, that is considered to be pigul. And Rashi explains, Elamar Avashi kagon shapigel v'hotzi pigul b'svasa barishona uvishniya uveshlishis uvrevius lo pigul. He has that intention the first, second, third, but not the fourth. Kediktani behedya, as it says explicitly, bein barishona v'chulu v'lo katani revius. It doesn't say the fourth. Uvahazos shal tiaro shasik, and so therefore again, by those sprinklings shal tiaro, that's the tiaro of the mizbeach, when he's sprinkling on the mizbeach, he's silent. Uliolam time of Rabbi Meir mishum das rishono, and really that is the reason of Rabbi Meir. It's because we assume everything is al das rishona. V'ribusa ashmein, and it's teaching us a chiddush di'afa bishalo shasak elabazu. Even though he spoke out his intention of pikol every time, except that last one he was silent. Amrinan al das rishona. So we still say al das rishona. Demau detema, what might you have said? Isal kadaitach al das harishona osa lama lo shasak b'shnio v'shlishis v'yasal das rishona. If it's true that everything is according to the original intention, so why speak it out the second and third time? It should all be al das rishona. Kamash malon delo amrin and hachi. So it comes to teach us that we do not say that, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis.